Sorry for that. Always good to have a chat with some of the team managers and get that insight as to how they're managing the drivers as well. We now get ready though for the second part of Group C, and the interesting thing that I was talking a lot with Dara McCormack in that first race, staying out of trouble with the stewards, those penalty points carry over tomorrow. You just heard that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So that's I wonder if the drivers did. They probably did. But let's hope so anyway, because we're about to see a lot of action in this next race. I tell you, in towards turn one is going to be, I don't know, but could be messy. It's got potential because the first race of Spa was earlier on, and you just don't know with so much on the line. Everybody's going to be flying in there.
This is a track that they have so much experience in. Across all the platforms, this is a staple in global motorsport. The reality is, though, it is tricky. You've got the combination of high-speed, commitment-based corners and then slower corners where the rear end's struggling for traction. You're trying to keep the car underneath you. Fortunately, these drivers all share the fixed setup. They've not been tweaking the car to their adjustment. They've got to get the speed from what they have.
They certainly have, and the car that you've chosen as well, of course, at the start of the season, which will have its different strengths and weaknesses at Spa. However, it does seem like one of the more balanced circuits in terms of the cars. We were speaking earlier about Monza and which cars are best there. The Porsche looking strong and all that kind of thing. None of that discussion has really been too prevalent here at Spa. So everyone's on pretty level ground, and with everybody on pretty level talent as well, let's say, it's shaping up to be a very, very close one here for race 6 even.
Can see some of the team managers getting ready to rumble with qualifying just moments away from getting underway. And of course, it is time to go around for 7 kilometers, about 2 minutes, 14 seconds, the lap times that we should expect. And of course, track limit, something that very much will come into play. Who do you think is going to get pole here? Josh Rogers, king of qualifying, has got 1. Can he get 2?
I think so, but the pressure will be off him, won't it? Because he's won that first race. He'll be thinking, well, I've got really nothing to lose now, and so that lack of pressure may well just push him on forward. There are some other drivers, though, like Dara McCormack, who really does need to do well here. I know that he's been avoiding Hockenheim, especially in that Mercedes, really not enjoying that anymore in that car. So he's come and doing these 2 races. He's got a lot of pressure on him, but so many others. Think of Graham Carroll. He could get a pole and needs it as well. You could argue, where have guys like Yuri Toman got to finish? Jamie Fluke, what have they got to do? The pressure is really on them.
Let's ride with Josh Rogers. Pole position once already, and through Malmedy maximises that track on the left-hand side. Down the hill and into a corner that has a couple of different approaches. Rogers keeping tight to the inside curb. A couple more drivers might elect to V the corner and arc it a little bit more. Down through what is now Speaker's Corner, traditionally no name, with gravel on its outside. Cannot afford to find 2 tires into the surface that will restrain the momentum. Through Pouon, look at Rogers mount the curb on entry and really commit the car through the double left and in towards the Piff Path.
Yeah, it looked like he was sliding the whole way around there, but it looked all right in the end. Seems to be going okay in this lap time at the moment through the Piff Path chicane, trying to keep as tight to these apexes as possible, really not too much to this chicane, and then you get into a very important corner indeed. It's a very long flat out run here from down at the very bottom of the circuit, climbing uphill a little bit gradually towards Blanchimont, which should be absolutely flat out.
Especially in qualifying trim, you say a long run, 1.7 odd kilometers from the exit of what some will call campus on the run up into the bus stop chicane through the we say flat-out corner of Blanchimont. Look at the car. It looks as planted as you could hope for. Into that final chicane, though, it is about getting as close to the inside corner as you can to try and set up for the final part of the apex. Rogers clambers over the curbs once again, and the king of qualifying runs his way to the line, maximizes the track on exit. Straight line to the start-finish line, and it's 2:14.274. Very competitive. Let's see what everyone else has got to offer.
He's put the line in the sand, and now what are everyone else going to do? We've got Benet and Job here right in the next couple of drivers, so this is going to be a real good benchmark now because the podium sitters from that first race are all on here very, very early on.
Pretty competitive sector times there from Max Benecca as he powers his way in the Audi for miles to the line. It's a 2:14.378, so it's a 10th off, but once again Benecca's going to be hoping good enough to start inside of the front couple of rows. Sebastian Job next on deck.
Let's see what he can do here, and what does he need as well, because it's not a particular, is it very important one for him, but he's not delivered, I'm afraid, in the middle sector. 1 minute 1.5 is very slow indeed. I guess we're thinking slow down there, and so this is going to be a lot of work. He's by no means confirmed in at the moment.
He's going to now have a lot of work to do. There's the disappointment for Sebastian Job. 2:16. We'll be hoping not to be at the back of the field like Dara McCormack. Here's the heroic Porsche, though. They've been flying today.
They certainly have. Tommy Uskov really set the tone by going first and finishing second in his first 2 races of the afternoon. And now Mikko Gala trying to follow on from that, really, and also join him in that final tomorrow. Out of the final turn now for the Danish driver. Looks over at his lap time. It's not Rogers' quality, unfortunately. It's only 3rd.
It's still going to be good enough, though, I think, to potentially start inside of the top 6, which is where he will want to be. Dara McCormack, a lap time that must be almost perfect. That second sector decent, first sector pretty good as well, but trending closer you'd think to Benecca than to Rogers in terms of the time. Good look at the hands there as McCormack hustles the Mercedes through the final corner. Shake of the head though. What's it going to be at the line? It's a 2:14, a 4:72. At the very least he's up in 3rd.
Yeah, at the least, but he doesn't really know, and I think expects a lot of drivers to actually overcome him there and push him a lot further down the order. Kaki Oliveira now through Blanchimont here for Furia, looking to lead the line for that team once again, as none of their drivers really so far have had very good evenings, and so it may be up to the Brazilian to lead the team again.
Well, we are not sure if this is truly still a Brazilian team, because of course they've got the Danish contingent of Lasse Sorensen and Lasse back for Oliveira though. 14.490, just off that pace of Dara McCormack for Kaki Oliveira. But a pretty decent lap time, all things considered. Here comes Enzo Benito up next.
Yeah, kind of middling race for him, first of all, today. But let's see what he can do now in this second race. In his second race, a lot on the line here, of course, and some big names are going to be knocked out as he comes out the final corner in qualifying.
And as it stands right now, if Rogers can grab the victory in the second race, that means that only one driver likely to be guaranteed to move on forward. Enzo Benito slides up in front of Mikkel Gala, the slowest of the times, second slowest of the times, with no slowdown on the board. Jamie Fluke in the Apex Racing Team car, second sector not looking that good, above the 60-second bracket that you want to try and break.
Yeah, not quite there, unfortunately, for Jamie Fluke, and he will need something from this second race, as well as we look at someone else's hands into the final bus stop chicane. Jamie Fluke will now power his way towards the start-finish line. It's a 14.2 from Rogers to set the benchmark so far, and Jamie Fluke has only got a 14.8 to his name.
Not a slowdown necessarily, but that second sector in the Audi, clearly not the most optimal. Graham Carroll, another driver that goes above the 60-second bracket in that second sector, but all things considered, fairly decent opening sector to the lap. Is it going to be good enough, though, for him to jump at the very least in front of Jamie Fluke, hopefully in front of Mikkel Gala or Enzo Benito with a flying final sector? We saw Carroll struggle with the fronts at the end of the previous race. In qualifying, it's only a 14.750, better than Fluke behind Gala.
And he knows that that may well not be good enough, and he's going to need some things to go wrong in towards well, any of the corners really, but turn 1 ideally here to start off this race. Gianmarco Ferrucci has some work to do as well. He couldn't break the 1 minute mark in the middle sector either, and also probably needs a race win, as is the case for Ferris Stanley just afterwards.
I think that's 3 drivers in a row that have been unable to get into the 59s in that second sector, and so for Ferrucci, a rather slow final sector as well. We'll see him in front of Job, yes, but now with just Stanley and Toman. Will Ferrucci be on the final row? We're about to find out. Interesting point about Ferris Stanley. We so often talk about, do drivers wear gloves, shoes? What do they use for the physical hardware that we have? Direct drive wheelbase, of course, from VRS, as well as the pedals. Ferris Stanley races in sandals. That's an interesting choice, not one that you often see, but the Indonesian out of the final corner. I didn't enjoy qualifying in the previous race. This time by at least is able to jump in front of Sebastian Job, albeit not in front of Gianmarco Ferrucci.
Yeah, may well be on the back row with Sebastian Job here, you'd imagine, with Jiri Toman still flying around the circuit here, the Czech driver needing a performance as well. There's pressure on so many of these drivers, arguably only Josh Rogers in the clear at the moment, and he looks to be on the pole position. Just a little bit of a miss of the apex there from Toman. Think he would have liked to get that one in a little bit further. Let's see what his time is going to say.
He slipped down the championship at the end of the spring season, but he jumps up to third in the qualifying order. He doesn't look too impressed with that. He wanted pole position, but once again, the king of qualifying with the ALG fastest qualifying lap, it's Joshua Rogers that once again establishes himself on top.
Absolutely. After one race win at the Nürburgring, he's getting set for one at Spa as well.
To run you down then through that starting grid, because boy is what has become known as the toughest group got very much more interesting with Rogers on top for the second time in the qualifying session. At the very back, it's a driver that we know will have a lot of work to do after finishing on the podium in race number 1. Sebastian Job, having issues in qualifying, has got a lot to do from 12th. Alongside him, Ferris Stanley on debut, hoping that he can work his way up forward, while Gianmarco Fiducci, the final driver, not able to get into the 214s. He's alongside Jamie Fluke. That's a rather nice row to look at. Graham Carroll and then Mikel Gala line up 8th and 7th positions, with Enzo Benito just missing out on a top 5 starting spot, but Kake Oliveira able to break into the 214.5s. It's going to be Dara McCormack, last in qualifying for race number 1, 4th in qualifying here, but surely needing a victory alongside Yuri Toman, while Max Benecke, a second race in second for Josh Rogers. Ultimately, he is surely looking good to make it to the finals. Josh Rogers, I think the king of qualifying suits him quite well as a title.
Well, yeah, but for me that implies that he's not very good at racing, which is also not true. So yeah, just quick is what we can go for here. But another pole position. I think more than anything, this most recent pole stands him in good stead for tomorrow more than anything. The consistency, the confidence he'll get. Not that he needs any more confidence, to be fair, but if he did, then he's just bumped that up to 100%, because it doesn't really matter. But now he really knows that it's not just a one-off.
We had talked about this a little bit yesterday, and that some of the team managers have very much worked with their drivers to place them into the groups with the tracks that they wanted to be in. This group that we get to call is, of course, we've seen a rather interesting race at the Nürburgring. Spa up next, and Group D is going to see us go to the Hockenheimring and to finish at Monza. That's where the managers very much have to understand their teams and make the most of it.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's where a role is so important, of course. People think it's all about the drivers, but this really is a team game after all, and that sets the drivers up to where they're meant to be.
Let's talk about the championship very briefly then, because of course Kevin Siggy, with the double race win in group number 1, still sits on top with the 70 points, and what a margin he has built back to those behind. Ultimately, we thought the margin was going to be 30 to 35 to be able to get you into the top 12. As it stands right now, still of course with Group D and 1 race in Group C to go, Patrick Holtzman sits on the outside looking in, as do the likes of Bennett, Atoman, De Jong. So many strong names, like we said though, on the right hand side of that screen.
Absolutely, and of course those on the right are not making it through to tomorrow. You will see them again on Saturday, so make sure you join us again for that when we do the Teams Championship. But this is the drivers, where there's so much on the line. Those on the left, as you can see, currently on their way through. Josh Rogers, probably one of those who's already confirmed. Max Benecke just needs to, cross the, dot the I's and cross the T's. There we are, to get himself through as well, and he'll be all right. But as we said so many times, the pressure here is unbelievable with what is on the line.
Marco Page and Kevin Ellis Jr. have been waiting since Group A to see if those 29 points are going to be enough for them. They will continue to wait, and surely rather nervously. Drivers getting ready to go as the lights begin to build here at Spa-Francorchamps. It's a 7-kilometer journey through the Ardennes, and for some it's their final chance to make ther way forward in this ESL R1 sponsored by Aramco Drivers' Championship. Lights go out and we go racing. Great start from Joshua Rogers as they lead them on that climb up the hill into La Source. Jamie Fluke's going ultra aggressive on that climb up the hill, but in through the opening corner. Crucially for Dara McCormack, navigates through it safely, and now 2 kilometers before they hit the brakes once again into Les Combes.
And now the pressure's on. Dara McCormack just hangs back a little bit as Yuri Toman applies the pressure to the Maus Audi of Max Benecke, and now there's Josh Rogers who'll be under pressure as well. This run up towards Les Combes is going to close everyone together.
Double toe, triple toe, quadruple toe, depending on where you are in line. Benecke goes to the outside. McCormack follows him. Too wide, too deep, up into Les Combes, the highest point on the track. Benecke had a moment where he led, but now Rogers comes back on the inside in towards Malmedy. McCormack into 4th spot as Toman holds on to 3rd. What a fight into Les Combes.
Absolutely. Max Benecke not quite able to do it, and Yuri Toman looks up the inside of Bruxelles. He can't get there. Neither can Darren McCormack either. The pressure on McCormack so much after scoring so few points in the opening race. He knows what he needs to do. He's talented enough to do it as well, but does he have the time in this race? Will he get the things falling the right way? He's got 7 laps to manage this.
3 years ago, Darren McCormack was playing on a controller. Now he is at the pinnacle of esports racing here and looking to try and carve his way forward. Surely needs the victory, like we say. That's going to be a very hard task with which to work. One driver's dropped back, I will note. Ferris Stanley at the very back of the field.
He has indeed. You mentioned Darren McCormack needing a race win, though. Look who's behind him. He also needs a race win. And then the one after that, and the one after that.
They all need race wins in some ways. Sebastian Job's the one that I'm a little bit concerned for. Sits currently outside that bubble and has only been able to get in front of Ferris Stanley with that mistake. He still rides in 11th spot.
Absolutely, so it's pressure on for everyone here as they all run in one long line basically from Josh Rogers right the way to the back of the field, and Sebastian Job at the back. Unfortunately, as you say, Ferris Stanley now dropping away. What's going to happen down here towards the bus stop? Is it going to be all cordial between them? It will be, apart from Sebastian Job, who knows that time is not on his side, and so he's made an outrageous dive bomb into the final turn. I don't think it turned out well, to be honest, either.
I think he did get past Mikel Gala, but they cost each other a whole bunch of ground. So Job up into 8th position now. Jamie Fluke for a moment drops down on the timing screen. Gianmarco Fiducci is seemingly gone as well. Yeah,
I think he's gone from the race, unfortunately. Didn't see what happened to him, actually, but he seems to be at the back. And Jamie Fluke being at the back now as well is probably going to spell the end of his Thursday as well. Everyone's Thursday is ending here, but he's not going to tomorrow, is what I mean. Max Benecke is going to be under a lot of pressure now from Yuri Toman. It's an all-Audi battle for second place as the Porsche gets slipstreamed absolutely no end. Now Toman goes for it.
And is it going to be an aggressive send, or is Toman going to know that there's that still to go? Door-to-door rubbing, they will enter the corner. Once again, outside switches back to inside, but Toman leans on Benecke in towards Malmedy. He does have the advantage. He has got second spot, and the RAG driver now focuses on Rogers up the road.
And just behind, Darren McCormack was side-by-side with Enzo Benito as well for 4th place. That was very close, but the Italian couldn't get through. Now Kaki Oliveira's on his case as well as Graham Carroll, who's just joining in as well, getting that little bit closer once again. So it's all getting very close, but it's allowing the Australian to get away with this lead.
In towards Pujon. 1.2 that margin. The draft still not yet broken, but Rogers surely not far away from being able to stretch his legs and run away from those behind and match Kevin Siggy with 2 race victories in this Group C, what we thought was going to be the toughest group of them all.
And it's proving to be fairly hard, if we're honest. Josh Rogers and Max Benecke have done a good job here of getting the points they need, but will it just be those two? I mean, we were talking earlier about can anyone get 2 wins out of this group? I said no. This is looking famously bad for me at the moment, but it could mean that becomes true.
Benecke now behind Toman will surely also have to watch for the LG driver to watch Darren McCormack as he tries to work his way on forward. For McCormack, it's tough right now. We were chatting about this in terms of how did he work race number 1. Didn't want to force the issue, accumulate penalty points, but ultimately finishing outside of the top 5 meant a victory was all that was going to be good enough.
And it comes back to qualifying again. He qualified in 4th place with a very respectable lap time indeed. Very good lap time, in fact, but even 4th, even 2nd row was not enough. He needed to be on the front row really at the start, because the further back you are, the more likely it is that someone is going to get away in the lead before you're in 2nd, if you get there at all. So it made McCormack's life very difficult, and he may already be starting to feel the effects of accepting that within himself.
You've got to wonder in some ways as well for that qualifying. 1 lap means that you're really trying to push as much as possible. Some drivers will lay up a little bit and relax through certain parts of the track. Is Max Benecke going to relax on that run towards Lecom? Yuri Toman says, not right now. Let's try and close the 1.3 seconds to the leader.
I'm pretty sure I saw brake lights from Max Benecke there, and you can see why. They still want to try and catch the race leader, but the damage may be done now. 1.3 seconds may be enough for Josh Rogers to just hold that lead, at least keep them at arm's length for the remainder of this race. And if that's the case, then he'll be very pleased indeed. Max Benecke will probably be fine as well. Will Yuri Toman? Well, he'll be on that cusp, and he'll have to watch the final group with a bit of anxiousness.
A little bit of anxiousness, I'm sure, for plenty of the drivers watching on from Group A and B as well, to see that Rogers leads will be a great relief to them, that even more of the strong drivers potentially not going to join us. 48-12, that is ruthless. Ewan mentioned that in the first race of Group C here today. Almost halfway through this race, drivers still continuing with those tires. We mentioned earlier, Mercedes, one of the few cars that uses the fronts more than it uses the rears, and that's something that we saw Graham Carroll really struggling with.
And I feel like one of the circuits where you don't want this to happen is at Spa, because you've got some very long corners, thinking of the likes of Pouon, or even not long corners, but you know, Le Carmen, the Pif Paf chicane as well. They are not nice when you've got understeer and the front tyres are already going, so that may be a concern for the Mercedes drivers. They have obviously got the likes of Job just in front at the moment, so he could take advantage of that a little bit in the final half of this race.
I think for Jiri Toman, by the way, second should be enough to get him up to 43 points. Never trust a commentator's math, especially when it comes from Arjuna, but hopefully I will be correct and validated on that one. As we mentioned, only driver out of this race right now, Gianmarco Fiducci in that FaZe Clan machine. He'll be disappointed that his very first LAN event has come to a close in the Drivers' Championship. He'll return on Saturday, of course, in that Team Championship. Ferris Stanley, Jamie Fluke, both involved in issues. They run back in 10th and 11th spots.
They certainly do. On board with Max Benecke right now, up the hill through Eau Rouge and Radion. Is this is the moment where he's decided, well, I might as well go for it now, or will he still be intent on catching Josh Rogers? Jiri Toman certainly seems to think he'll need to defend right now, and he's not quite correct, because Max Benecke is not interested at all.
Still, I think 1.3 seconds seems closable if you are Max Benecke. You also don't want to leave yourself vulnerable to Dara McCormack sending a move up your inside, knowing that a double podium is what we are talking about in moving on forward. The counter way to look at this, though, if you are Max Benecke, is that Jiri Toman currently sits just outside of that bubble, 13 points. Every point that you can take away from Toman puts him at increased risk of being outside of that bubble. Remember, Toman didn't get a podium in the opening race of Group C.
Absolutely. So he'll need to just change that around and then bite his fingernails off at the end of the day, no doubt. So will some of these further behind. Enzo Benito needs a little bit more right now after a sort of so-so first race. He's having a similar second as well, but I think he's got something more to give here, with Darren McCormack right in front, not particularly enjoying himself this weekend at the moment, the way that car's behaving. Benito still in the running, certainly.
I'll just say, BOP, 3 letters that in sim racing or real racing, you always know that you're going to have a heated conversation about. Mercedes looks very strong back in Munich. It does seem a lot more equal across the board. Porsche, Audi, Mercedes, BMW, all of those marks in the top 5 as they run for the time being. But tyres continue to be a concern for McCormack as he slips further back into the clutches of Enzo Benito. Through Blanchimont, you can see that Benito lifted slightly, not to get too close to the back of the Irishman. Not going to be close enough for ascend at the final chicane.
Just lost a bit of that momentum through Blanchimont to have a go there, so he'll have to go again and figure that one out a little bit later on. Benecke was pretty close on that occasion to Jiri Toman as well, and that allowed the gap to Josh Rogers to just extend to 1.6 at its maximum. I think this race win is gone now, and with it, some of the chances for progressing through into day 2 here for some of these drivers.
We will just remind you that if at the end of our 8 races, at the end of Group D, if there are drivers tied on points for 12, we will have a showdown, a hot lap session where drivers get 1 attempt and the fastest driver locks themselves in to fight for the Drivers' Championship prize pool of $400,000. I will just say as well right now, with Josh Rogers sitting at the very top of the field, Max Benecke closing, but not going to get close enough into Lecombe to pass for second. There's 2 drivers in contention, surely, for the Gidia MVP of the day, Kevin Siggy and Josh Rogers.
Certainly, two race wins for the both of them over the course of their 2 races is very hard to argue with, but if I was to pick one right now, I would have to go for Josh Rogers, to be honest, given it's a slightly difficult, more difficult group than he went for. Group A may even turn out to be one of the weaker ones, maybe if not the weakest of the 4. Not saying it was weak, by the way, but weaker than some of the others. and Group C, the group of death is what we labelled it as at the start.
Yeah, I think the reality is Group A and Group D are maybe the two that we think there's a little bit more variance across the two races, depending on the tracks as well. But ultimately, put you in or myself into one of those groups, we're dead last, and we know it. Beneka really closes into the piff path. 1.6 seconds now the front. 2 laps to go. Rogers surely almost out of the drafting range, and if he's able to break that hole in the air, does that mean Yuri Toman becomes more vulnerable? Beneka, McCormack, Benito getting stacked up behind. 2 laps to run, and surely some overtakes to talk about.
Rogers home and dry now, but what about the other 4 for second place? Yuri Toman corking the bottle a little bit, you could say here. It certainly seems that the Miles Audi could stretch its legs a little bit more if the RH Audi wasn't in its way, and Darren McCormack's even keeping pace quite well despite struggling a little bit into some of those turns, especially last lap. He gets quite close in towards the bus stop and now knows that, it'll need a bit of a miracle at the moment to get through. A little bit wide from Toman there, it wasn't a great exit, and now Beneka will just close in and maybe have that chance at Lecom.
Oliveira in 6th position, a little bit off the back of Enzo Benito, so I'm not necessarily sure that the Furia 32 BMW is going to be in contention. Look at that shot of the stage. I mentioned it earlier. For some drivers, first LAN event. For others, first LAN event in a couple of years, and the energy, the excitement, so palatable. Even more importantly, in some ways, Ewan, for you and me being able to go to talk to the drivers and get some information, it's also great for the drivers to go and talk to their fellow competitors and build that sense of camaraderie.
Absolutely, it's one of the fantastic things about a LAN event that we really enjoy, and we've had a few times so far this year, which has been absolutely fantastic as Max Beneka weaves to defend, or is it attack? It's definitely defend because Darren McCormack's alongside him.
I think we're going to see a shout here for our KFC's Colonel's best overtake of the day here, because Darren McCormack, not likely to make his way on forward, will want to at least show the speed that we know that he can bring. The first 2-time winner in the ESL R1 campaign. A lap and a half to go though, and with Beneka not looking like he wants to make a move. He looks a little bit more concerned about the challenge behind. Is McCormack, as he continues to push the limits of the track, going to come up against an immovable force? Because
after all, I think Beneka can afford to lose third place here, but he can't afford to get removed entirely from the race, or pushed way down to 10th or 9th or whatever it is. That's when he's in danger, and that's where he's going to lose. So he's not going to defend with all his might, I don't think, but he may well just give and take. But the danger is that once McCormack comes through, then Benito's there, then there's Sebastian Job, who's done a pretty good job to get up to 6th place, by the way. Kaki Oliveira's close as well, so you've got a big danger of falling a long way if you let someone through there.
That move just happened, by the way. Job getting in front of Oliveira for 6th position. For Job, it is going to be too little too late, surely, though. Podium in race 1, climbs from the back to 6th in the second race, and once again a driver that continues to just show his speed is impressive everywhere we see him competing. And now team championship for G2 Esports. Freddie Rasmussen joins the party. It's going to be a rather strong lineup with which we take a look at coming on Saturday and Sunday. Towards the final lap that we will go, though, Josh Rogers will lead us onto the final stretch around Spa-Francorchamps. 1.6 seconds clear, margin coming down, but still it's all eyes on second and the battle behind Toman.
Are we going to see any change here? What are the drivers behind going to do when they know that their future in this series is on the line? Out of La Source for Yuri Toman. He's got a good exit, actually. He might be all right for Max Beneka here, but his run up the hill, Beneka, is always absolutely fantastic. On board with Yuri Toman now. He's going to have to be absolutely committed. Revs it out in 5th gear, up over the top of the hill, and now he'll look to the rearview mirror.
Who's got the best slingshot? 2 kilometers from La Source, climbing up to the highest point of the track into the braking zone of Lecom. Toman doesn't look like he's got any sort of concerns. Neither does Beneka. No overtakes on the very final climb into Lecom.
That is a surprise there, because you very rarely see on the final lap everyone not, I suppose they weren't backing off, were they? They were trying, but they just couldn't manage it, and that's quite rare. At Spa, you don't even need a wonderful, fantastic exit out of that first turn to have a good chance, like you might at the Nürburgring or the Hockenheimring, for example. Here, you just need a decent exit, but unfortunately they couldn't even manage that.
It seems as though maybe the tyres playing a factor once again. McCormack playing loose with track limits on the exit of Speaker's Corner, and drops him back slightly from Beneka, but with Benito further dropping back, Joe further dropping back as well. Gaps opening up on this final lap, and once again we're seemingly seeing tyres in a 15-odd minute race being a factor.
We certainly are, especially for the Mercedes, so we'll see how that develops over the course of the weekend, because we're going to be seeing this combination a few times just yet. But out front, Josh Rogers has had a wonderful day so far. Only 2 races, but he doesn't need any more than half an hour to get into the groove, does he? He's just absolutely on it right from the very start, looking to add this achievement to his list. This is about the only thing in sim racing he hasn't won.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, for Porsche Coanda, we have seen both Mitchell de Jong as well as Mac Backham miss out on tomorrow's finals. It's the 2 Australians that now represent the Porsche Coanda esports team. For Josh Rogers, double race victories, contender for Gidia MVP of the day as he comes to the line to take the 2nd victory in the toughest group in the opening day of ESL R1 sponsored by Aramco competition.
Fantastic drive from Josh Rogers, and there he is, little emotion once again. He knows that he's done his job for the afternoon. He will be through to tomorrow, and he'll be a force to be reckoned with as well.
$400,000 will be on the line, that trophy as well. Josh Rogers proving why he is surely one of the favourites, matches Kevin Siggy in double race victories. We'll get a chat with him in a few moments' time, likely to be the first of many chats. You can see over his shoulder, though, disappointment for Jamie Fluke, and for only 12 drivers elation. For the rest of the 48 that entered today, it's dejection.
It certainly is. Max Manetko, one of those who might be pleased. Yuri Toman, is he going to be? Let's see. Let's find out how he did it.
Let's watch the replay of the start. Up the hill in towards Les Combes they went, and it was Jamie Fluke that went aggressive, trying to get the inside of Gianmarco Fiducci. Darren McCormack, crucially, able to hold off those behind as Redline and Furia will battle in their BMWs down the hill on that 2-kilometer rise into Les Combes.
Yeah, it was very calm at this stage. Everyone was kind of feeling around where they were, and everybody stayed roughly in these positions till the end. There was a moment later on where Yuri Toman managed to get ahead of the Maus Audi, and what a battle that was. But for Darren McCormack, he just left himself a little bit too much to do.
Another look on board, this time I believe with the Redline BMW as we just ride on the cockpit. I believe it's Kake Oliveira. But as the highlights come to an end, let's go chat with Josh Rogers once again.
Josh Rogers. I'm sensing a theme here, buddy. Congratulations. Another win in the books, another 35 points. Not that you really needed it to go to tomorrow's finals, but nevertheless. Quick follow-on question from what we spoke about earlier. Were you keeping a closer eye on tyre preservation throughout that race so that you didn't come across the same issues coming out of the end of it?
I definitely was trying to a little bit. To be fair, I probably hurt them more than I had in the last race, but I was trying to push a little bit more in the opening couple laps to build a gap to Max in the hope that I would break enough draft for him to, well, which would then stop him from being able to defend as easy against Yuri. In the end, that happened. They battled a bit, gave me a good 1.5 seconds to work with, and from there I was just trying to keep it consistent and keep running through the race. But yeah, honestly, a perfect start to the Drivers' Championship for this week. 2 poles, 2 wins. I can't be any happier than that.
بالضبط. بعد ما سألنا المتسابق اللي معنا فعلا هذا ثاني انتصار يحققه معنا بعد سباقين متواصلين وراء بعض، قدر يحقق انتصار ساحق. سألنا أنه كيف شاف السباق، ومن جد يعني قدر يحقق انتصار غير مسبوق، وقام قال أن المتسابق صحيح أنه كان حاول يستغل السباق شلون يكون لصالحه، خصوصا أنه برضو في السباق الثاني بالنسبة له ارتكب أخطاء أكثر من السباق الأول، لكن حاول أنه يأخذ الأفضلية في بداية السباق ويصنع المسافة الكافية ويستغلها في الجولات الأولى على أساس أنه يعطي الأريحية في آخر الجولات، يصير مهما ارتكب من أخطاء عنده مسافة كافية يقدر يعوض فيها.
Well, Josh, if we're talking about points at this point, Kevin Siggy, you've matched him, 70 points each. Now, I spoke to him earlier, and I said, you know, given the tracks that you haven't raced on as of yet on here in competition, which ones are going to give you the most difficulty? Now, you've got Hockenheim and Monza on that list. Which of those two would you feel like possibly might give you a bit more trouble?
Honestly, it's hard to say because Hockenheim's been a good stomping ground for me. That being said, as of late, it hasn't been. So that could be a tricky one. But also Monza, it's a track where qualifying isn't necessarily so important. It is one of my strengths. So that one would probably be the hardest track of all of them because you have to manage the race much more different. You know, you're kind of thinking about a lot more things. You're managing draft. It's much harder to break away, like what we saw in Spa. That's typically not possible at Monza. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It'll probably be one of the two. But honestly, I feel pretty comfortable at all the tracks. So yeah, we'll just try and get some clean qualifying laps in and fingers crossed.
بالضبط. بعد ما سألنا المتسابق في أي الحلبات هي بالنسبة لك اللي راح تكون التحديات فيها أصعب، خصوصا أن في اليوم النهائي راح تصير بحلبات مختلفة راح تكون معنا، فذكر أنه صحيح أنه بالنسبة له سبا كان يمكن أقل صعوبة، لكن مونزا تحديدا هو اللي كان فيها أكثر الصعوبة وأكثر التحديات، لكن في نفس الوقت أنه يقدر يتخطاها زي ما شفنا في سباقه اليوم، فأنه يقدر يتأقلم مع أي التغييرات اللي ممكن تصير. لكن بإذن الله كل اللي يأمله أن بكرة تكون لصالحه حتى بلا صح المضامير اللي راح تكون معنا.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for joining us in your post-race interview. Congratulations, 2 wins in the books, and we look forward to seeing what you bring for tomorrow's finals. And with that, we're going to send it back over to the desk to break everything down before we start our final group, Group D.
بالضبط. أعزائنا المشاهدين، باقي عندنا المجموعة الأخيرة اللي راح نحدد منهم راح يكملون باقي معنا المشوار إلى النهائيات. خلونا نروح على طول على الاستديو نتكلم تفاصيل ونرجع لكم في السباق الأخير.